Ken. All right, we're live.
We're good? We're good. Okay, we'll get going again. Hopefully everybody online is online. One thing I need from the people online is when this is over, if you'd send an email to director@irondog.org, or I think Amy Custard was the other one that was sent out. Please send her or myself an email that says that you've attended the rookie workshop virtually. It's an ISR requirement that we need to fulfill, so thank you. Chris?
Okay, there was a question asked online about the like the Polaris 7S display. I use it on my mountain sled, so I'm familiar with it. We are going to use this, we're going to try the 7S display this year, so I don't really have any pros and cons on using it yet, just because, like I said, we haven't used it in the past, other than dabbling in it on our mountain sleds. It seems like a good idea. I can talk about it later on in the season. Just hit me up, and after we start actually training with it. So, let's see here. Was there any questions at all from the first half of the? You guys have any questions at all? And, don't be afraid to just raise your hand while we're talking about something while you're thinking about it, because I know what happens is you kind of forget. But kind of go into personal hygiene, things to be thinking about. Some guys carry like a day bag on their sled, but things to think about while you're, it's a little bit more of a sensitive topic. But talking about butt chafing, I mean, it can happen and it's real. I mean, it can ruin your whole trip. The first day you get, a raw butt, man, and it's hard. So. A lot of people, Vaseline. I mean, one of my ex-teammates used to have his own concoction of Preparation H and Vaseline and all kinds of stuff. So, something to think about, especially on those long days. And again, if you keep yourself dry, that makes a huge difference than, riding in wet clothes or being damp. Let's see. You might want things to think about carrying. You might want to have a toothbrush with you for the race. Some regular day things. Medication, like aspirin or pain management, any of your regular medication, make sure you have enough with you. As Larry puts it, don't you try anything new. You don't want to find out that, something new that you're trying causes diarrhea, right? So don't try something new during the race, but definitely have something with you that you're familiar with. And again, same with like medication, just make sure you have your stuff with you.
It seems self-evident on some of this stuff, and I've learned my best lessons from absolutely doing it the wrong way. One of the worst experiences of my life was a training run, eating a tuna fish sandwich at Rainy Pass, and the smell of me breathing that back without having a toothbrush or coming back into Big Lake was literally one of the worst things I've ever had to endure. The smell of that tuna fish coming back at me for the next couple hours was brutal. And then, now that I'm a retired physician, I won't get in trouble for saying this, but I will admit, better living through pharmacy. And it was early on in the career, and I said, all right, there's drugs that make you go to sleep, there's drugs that keep you awake, I'm going to do the drugs. This was literally day one, and I took a sleeping pill. I'd never taken it before. It was the wrong thing to do. Absolutely do not try something new if you haven't done a test run. Because I am then hallucinating, and I hand off my GPS unit, which I was trying to do something on it at the time, and I think I gave it to Matt Spurnack to hold on to me. Meanwhile, it was Dan Tebow who sees me walking around and puts me to bed and then blocks the door so I can't be hallucinating around the house anymore. So don't do that. Learn from my mistakes. If you haven't tried it, and not saying try drugs, that's not the time to experiment, okay? Don't do it.
Another thing too is they kind of touched on having a first aid kit. I think one thing is making sure you have a first aid kit that's really viable for you. Making sure that it has things that you would really use I know that you talked about like the clot.
So I
And you've
actually
been in a
have-
position
I've
where
been
you
in a
needed it.
position. I got my leg in 2006. I got a cut that goes from here all the way to like inside there. I can stick my hand in that deep, like almost grab my hip. It was bad. I didn't have it. I wrecked instantly. It was bad enough and it bled so bad I just feel everything going wet. We were able to just kind of close everything up. Hindsight though, since then, I wish, I don't know, maybe on a physician side, I made it, but what if I would have got something worse and I couldn't have stopped it bleeding? So I carried QuikClot with me. That's like, if it was bad enough, I had that in there. If we were really, really bad, I had QuikClot. And they're not here, so they're gonna give you this generic, you need this first aid kit. That is the Pass Tech. Build that first aid kit and you're gonna go through that and there's certain things in there you do not need. I opened that up, I have the package of it, but I'm gonna put in more bandages, more A-strap stuff if I needed something like that. I'm gonna add QuikClot. I'm gonna add all the other little things that I think are more pertinent to having out there, which is more than likely is I see as a cut or an impalement, a stick, something of those nature that, and maybe take Larry's stance on this, and what would be a good thing.
Absolutely, I think that's perfect. You're gonna take the stuff you use, having a chemical cold pack, taking up the space in some of those kits is useless. Without that, you got snow. I mean, it's just common sense approach to it.
Yeah, and I think you hit right on. Make sure you go through it. No matter what you got, where you got it, go through it. We had it happen this year hunting. We had 3 first aid kits. And the first night we were there, I called a bull in for a young man. And I went back to camp to get the pack, and the first thing he did was stuck his knife right through his leg. He slipped, went right into his leg all the way in. Back at camp, we had 3 first aid kits and not 1 stitch. So, look at, I think it's, you gotta think about it in this fashion, and these guys can attest to it. You could be life or death by what you have.
Yep, so.
Makes
Those
it
are-
happen in an instant.
So go through that, then just look through the kit. Just more than likely, like I said, the things I can see happening out there would be major cuts or impalements, things of those nature. That you're gonna be what, splinting, broken arm, broken something, right? So,
Flashlights, we didn't really hit too much on flashlights. Make sure you guys are carrying some different options. Make sure you talked about spare batteries plenty, but just make sure it's an option. I mean, there's times where we've been out there broke down and you're sitting out in the middle of the river just for safety purposes. It's nice to have a flashlight so you can flash somebody or flag somebody that shows you're walking down the trail or whatever. So make sure you have some kind of light. More than likely, you're just going to be sometime at nighttime if you're riding. We're going to move on to nutrition and hydration. Everybody's different, how everybody body process stuff, but be thinking about, I've been guilty of bringing some, power bars or whatever with me to go training and riding and stuff, and, you pull it out when it's 20 below out and it's just rock hard and you can chip a tooth. So be thinking about that. Everybody has kind of a different solution, the glue packs, the little gummy packs.
for me, I use the goo packs, like just the ones that they're like chocolate, mocha, there's all sorts of different flavors, just a little, I think Power Bar makes them or somebody. Those are great because I've never had them freeze so hard that they're not, whatever's in them, it doesn't freeze rock hard. As well as the block gummies, they're like the marathon type. A lot of the stuff you're gonna see from like marathon, endurance, stuff like that, that's a lot of what we're taking with there. And going back to same with medication, don't try a new one for the day of the race. Like, try this stuff now.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to deal with, oh, my body does not like that. Halfway McGrath or whatever. And then with that nutrition, I didn't do this early on in my career. I just kind of muscled. We never ate anything. I find myself now, I get to Squintin, and if I have a couple extra seconds, I'm putting one in already at Squintin. I stay ahead of it. I'm doing it in Whiskey Bravo, taking another one. Throwing a couple gummies. Those gummies are nice. I throw like 2 or 3 of them in my mouth, and I'll just kind of put a couple out in the corner and chew on one, suck on one for a while, then get another one. just trying to stay ahead of that curve, because you're gonna get hungry, you're gonna go through ups and downs. I mean, my longest day ever in the race was, did 710 miles. We went from Nome all the way down to Koyak, the whole entire Kotzebue Loop, and all the way back to Unicely in under 12 hours. It was a long, so I don't really think it's positioned to do. I don't know if they'll let us do those type of days anymore, some of the stuff, but you can have. I mean, I went through ups and downs that day of having energy, not having energy, hallucinating, I swear, to seeing things, and just trying to stay ahead of it. I was with having a little bit of food on you and being able to replenish that. So think about with that stuff too is it's not mandatory to have multiple days of food on the sled anymore, but if you want that stuff and you're planning out your race, we have some on an airplane, but I'll also ship some stuff to like Unicely. I'll have some Unicely and maybe Galena. I'll have stuff to replenish because I know I'm going to actually need the stuff that's on my sled while we're riding. So, and I'm not going to be able to find that stuff out there.
You know, on that same note, like I personally like to try and drink at every checkpoint if we can. It's huge. I mean, especially if you don't carry a Camelback. You know, taking that extra second, again, I know you always feel rushed and you want to be quick and efficient when you're going through the checkpoints, but, you know, taking that extra, 30 seconds to, a lot of the pumps are waiting anyways, so you might as well just get something to drink while you're waiting. So make sure you guys stay hydrated.
Problem with the new helmets now. Everybody's wearing an open or a closed face helmet.
Yeah.
It used to be a lot easier to drink. That was one of the advantages of those open face helmets. So consider that. I carry multi-purpose. I'm going to carry it anyways. Probably something to have as a repair. I have about a foot long chunk of fuel hose, grade fuel hose. I keep that sitting in my handlebar bag, and I can just throw that up in my helmet and whatever. Because a lot of times you'll have a bottle. It's nothing you can get up, or you're trying to spill it and it's cold, and you got that ice block around here, or you can't get that in there, or you just spill it, and then now you have all that whatever they have out there, whether it's water or some sort of drink, it's all spilled all over your chest. So I have that hose, I'll put it up to my mouth, get it like up to there, and then shove the hose in whenever I'm trying to drink, and I can suck it in real quick and then put the hose away and go. So,
We generally send straws out in the past, but if it's cold, they
I'll be honest,
don't work.
the straws, they snap, they break, they're
Yeah.
like, just have it, like the fuel hose is awesome. Like you're not gonna break it, it's good, party grade fuel hose, it's pliable, you can move it around, and if you probably want it on your sled anyways, just in case.
Training, when it comes to training and riding, I think if you're in a pro class, I think that, your goal should be obviously hitting a minimum amount of miles, whether it's 1,500 miles, 2,000 miles, I think would be a good minimum amount. Obviously, the more you can ride, the more prepared you're going to be. Sometimes it's hard to do that. Riding to Squintna, Shell Lake, potentially Quintilla or Whiskey Bravo. You don't have to do that. That's definitely not a necessity to do. I mean, it's expensive. But just getting on miles, trying different trails. I can tell you that you want to try, even if you don't take the Iron Dog Trail and if you don't know what it's like, ask somebody. But when you can get into that single lane, tight and twisty, there was one year where I put on a bunch of miles, but it was all on trails that were just straight. And then once we got, we did the race, realized that we weren't used to turning a bunch. So, I mean, you want to think about that when you're training. Cold weather training, we talked about this already. You're never going to get that experience of riding in cold weather. You don't want the first cold weather ride that you do during the Iron Dog. I mean, a lot of us, when you're recreating, it's 25 below or colder, you can say, you know what, I'm not interested in riding today. But during the race, I can tell you, other than a couple years, last year being one of them, historically, I would say it's 25 below on the Yukon 90% of the time. It's going to be at least 25 below. So you're going to encounter that, except other than there's a couple exception years to that, it's going to be at least 25 below and potentially colder than that. So you want to test stuff, you want to try stuff. I mean, everything is, if you're not used to riding in that weather, you want to be prepared to ride in that weather.
Let me add one to that, Chris.
Yeah.
So, and Chris can speak on this as well, and this is directed at people from out of state mostly. My respect for the people that get bit by the iron dog that live out of state and pull it off and can accomplish it is awesome, because the amount of travel time, other stuff, riding down south is different than it is up here. They'll get up here and say, man, I realized that you don't have groomed trails.
Yeah.
Their definition
Yeah.
of a groomed trail and ours is a little bit different. And it's that back and forth time. So make enough time to get some training rides in up here. Know it's gonna take, you're gonna break stuff and you gotta find down some replacement parts and other issues as part of that. So make the time and know that you're gonna be tired if you're traveling from Michigan or the East Coast, getting up here, trying to deal with this stuff.
Yeah, we got,
And we have a lot of out-of-state this year.
yeah, I remember back when the Big Lake Power Sports was there, some guys had left Pittman and rode out to Big Lake, some out-of-staters, and they showed up there. You know, keep in mind, they're riding the ditch there, and it's bumpy, but it's not even, they haven't even gotten to the rough part of the trail yet. They got off their sleds and they're like, man, that was the roughest trail I've ever been on in my entire life. And Frankie's like, you haven't even gotten to the bump yet. So, yeah, so it's just different. I mean, we don't have groomed trails. The trails aren't groomed. Sometimes they can be certain areas, but for the most part, it's an unmaintained trail that you're riding on. So you got to get used to riding those bumps. So
Be prepared to ride in different conditions too. A lot of you guys aren't gonna have an opportunity to maybe go train in the coastal region. Don't get so caught up in like, we have a small, the portion that you're gonna try, if you're from around here, the portion you're gonna ride on is from Squinton and Puntillo, like he's saying. It's a small portion of the race. It changes a lot up there. So be aware, like conditions. It's a good opportunity right now is what we have with how hard it is and icy. This is a lot more like what you're gonna see on a coastal. They're gonna have a lot of hard edges, hard ice. We have a lot of snowpack around here, which makes our bumps bigger and are more physically demanding, maybe more so than up there. But it's a whole different scenario. You're going at a faster pace. You're hitting things at a higher speed. So this isn't actually a bad opportunity right now with how the conditions are to get out and try it. Break away from the norm too. Like I think people get so caught up in like their sheep, their goats, like just, I'm gonna be down the same path, I'm gonna go to Squinton it back, or maybe I'm gonna go to Shell Lake. Like throw something else in there. Don't be afraid to go ride another loop and go try something else, because what's gonna happen your first day of the race is you're gonna see, once you get, even if you train them your McGrath or whatever, it's all new. Try doing something that makes you start thinking about looking at new obstacles, new terrain, rather than just beating miles down a trail.
trying new areas. Even riding in places that you haven't ridden before is going to be a lot like it, because even we've raced this, like Tyler and I have raced this race a bunch, you know, it changes year to year, whether it's the conditions, sometimes the trail changes a little bit, it's in a different spot, so you got to be also prepared to ride in an area that you've never ridden before. So, a couple other things to think about, going back to the hydration thing, like as you're training, working out, potentially like get yourself nice and hydrated before the race. Don't get dehydrated. They say it takes like 2 days to get rehydrated. So, leading up to the race, there's a lot going on, working on your sleds, having to do Tech Expo, all that stuff. Don't forget about that the week before the race if you want to stay nice and hydrated up to the race. Don't let that be a secondary thing.
Don't think either. I'm not knocking on them at all, but I do say, don't think I'm gonna go get an IV and I'm gonna be good. I see there's more and more people doing this on this now. And that's a cool, I think it's a neat concept. I think it's actually, it could. But if you're gonna do that, I'd highly suggest, just like the rest of this stuff, you should probably go try it now and make sure it doesn't mess with your stomach and there is repercussions to that. And I've heard of people doing that. You're also gonna pee. You're gonna have to stop and pee all the time. Try this stuff and don't just be like, oh, I'm gonna try it the day before the race. I'm gonna go get.
I know that they're up and Nome, and like I said, I'm not saying don't do this, but try it beforehand and understand what it's going to do to your body. Because I've heard that multiple times. That the guys will do it, and then they're like, man, I had to pee every 30 minutes, So, anyways, just think about that. Also think about like when you're training and stuff, caffeine or tobacco withdrawals. I mean, I'm addicted to caffeine, and it bothers me when I don't have caffeine. Although I changed my diet, I haven't had caffeine for a long time now, but I know in the past, I used to always, come the first of the year, basically wean myself off of any caffeine. That was just me. Obviously, depending on what level you're trying to race, it's probably not as big of a deal, but, it will dehydrate you too, so you gotta be thinking about that. It's just easier for me to get off it plenty of time, not, again, the day before the race, go cold turkey on this stuff. Same with tobacco products and stuff, like I said, you have to manage that before the time. I can't beat this in enough, but when you're training, you have to train like it's Iron Dog. I mean, we see this year in and year out. I can sit here and talk to you guys and tell you what you need to do, and we'll still see you guys out there not training like their Iron Dog sled. There'll be no tanks, no bags, no nothing, and the day of the race starts and they find out that their suspension's way too soft. So you need to be testing with your sled weighted down like it's going to be in Iron Dog. If you're not, you're going to have a miserable trip. You need to be training on what you're going to be riding in the race. And if you can have the same sled, everybody has these different things. Try and get it as close as you can, sled-wise, and the things and the weight that you're going to be carrying, so you can adjust suspension. You might need, if you're not training with it, you're not going to know what it's like, and it will be a miserable race when you find out your suspension's way too soft. So you got to try this stuff out. Packing and unpacking your sled, again, when you're training, be thinking about that during the race. The race is really about efficiency. It's not about being the fastest guy around. It's about being efficient with what you do. If you carry a day bag, practice taking that thing on and off. Those 10 seconds don't sound like a lot, but when you do that every day, that stuff starts adding up. Same with like in the checkpoint. So again, when you're training, try and do the same things. Practice with your oil and your gas, getting off the sled on the same side every time. Just little things like that. Again, it just becomes subconscious, and you don't have to worry about it during the race. It's just you do the same thing over and over again. Anything that can be subconscious is going to give you a huge advantage as opposed to you doing something different every single time. You got to think about it instead of thinking about what you need to be doing in front of it and ahead of you.
Rookie mistakes, caps and cowling, check it. It'll slow you down immeasurably.
I tell you right now, spare things you should have on your sled. Always have a spare gas cap when you race with your partner.
Yeah.
Have a spare oil cap and probably a radiator cap. Those are just like caps that could be a screw you up pretty bad. Not having one of those. And inevitably, oil caps have a tendency to disappear at the gas pump because you're gonna have people swarming around wanting to help. You could even say, no, I don't want your help, or set it over here. They might pick it up, and checker might walk off with it, or somebody from a kid, whatever. Not purposefully, just accidentally. It happens.
Yeah.
So those are.
Yeah, those are things we actually, I still to this day carry an extra fuel and oil cap.
Those are, yeah.
So,
Mine.
and again, training, if you're working out, that's great. You want to be in shape for the race. I've done this plenty of times, in shape, out of shape. I was asked 12 days before the race one year. I wasn't planning on racing the race, and I got kind of roped into it with 12 days to train, and it was miserable. It was tough. I mean, we weren't trying to set the world on fire either. We were just trying to have it. Our goal was not to win or anything like that, and even at that, just trying to keep a decent pace, it kicked my butt. So, working out at the gym, you can get with people that have been working out, figure out what they do. But the other thing too is nothing substitutes riding. So, try and ride as much as you can. I mean, that's one thing I can say is that, there's nothing. I mean, I can work out and be in the best shape of my life, and I can go push myself the first day of riding, and I can be more sore than I was the whole time I've been working out. So, something to think about. Also, when you're training, it was I think Tim had brought this up. You might want to consider, you guys end up kind of somebody that typically leads than the other person. Training is a great time to figure out what your role is going to be as a team sport, right? Who's gonna be the guy in the front, who's gonna be on the back. But no matter what, I highly recommend you guys switch that up. So it's not during the race, if something happens to that person, or like when he talked about losing his GPS and being the navigator, the other guy has no idea how the GPS even works because he's relied on this guy. Be the guy that's, if you're typically just following, lead for a little bit while you're training, even if it's just a little bit. I mean, but I would still say, 75-25 would be a good ratio at the most, where at least you have some experience doing something or doing it different than what you think you're going to be doing, because that can change a lot during the race, whether it's mechanically or whatever it is.
We don't allow that on my team.
Yeah. And that's why.
He'd be lost trying to get across Wasilla.
So yeah, but like I said, just try it out. You also you can find out. I mean, I know teams that have been racing, competitive teams that literally have never let the other person lead and found out that they are actually faster, switching it up. So, anyways, just something to be thinking about.
One thing actually about that is, if possible, try to keep snowmobiles set up similar if you can. Right? There's certain scenarios that it's not going to work out, but
Like Brian and Casey?
yeah, I don't know what those two do.
£100
Yeah, I don't
difference.
know what those two do.
Well,
Nick and I are actually, what's funny though is that there's a lot, like, not to get into like setups on snowmobiles, but setup, like Tyson and I we're 40 pounds different. Our sleds are identical. Nick is 30 pounds more than me. Ours are identical. So it has more to do with your riding style than anything. But with that, I was trying to say is, we're not so dependent on, our sleds are close enough. If I wiped out a GPS on my sled, I wouldn't be counting on Nick too. I'd be on his sled. We'd be swapping. I'd be afraid to swap sleds. I'd be honest, like, people get tech, they think that's your sled. No, I mean, you're a team. I'm going to ride his sled, or he can ride mine. Ours are they're identical. Like, he could ride, we could do that. And that's how ours are set up, to be able to do that. Handlebar positioning, everything is identical position between the two.
And I think to add to that, if you're a rookie or you're on one of these first rides or you're going through, if someone breaks an A-arm and you're milking it along, it's going to wear you out. Drop the pride and say, I'm tired, and swap up. Give the other person a rest to get it. If you're still rideable, it's going to be faster than towing in general. And if you're towing, swap machines too. It's a team. Look out for each other.
Yeah, 100%. Something also that reminded me, something that I did miss when we were talking about, when you're packing your sled, something to think about when you talked about like Casey and Brian. You got one of the smallest guys and one of the biggest guys racing. You're packing your secondary gear, like clothing. You might want to consider swapping the gear on the opposite person's sled. If you go into the water, because I can tell you this happened to me. I ran into, I buried my machine. It was completely covered. I completely had my sled was underwater. Had it been the other way around and it was my teammate and needed to get some dry clothes on, and I was racing with Matt Spurnack, and Matt was substantially bigger than he's substantially bigger than me. There's no way that he was fitting into my clothes. So just something to maybe think about, that if you really had yourself in a situation, you might want to consider doing that. Like if you lost your sled in a river, lake, and water or something like that, if you needed the dry clothes that they were on your teammate's sled, that might make sense. So just think about that. Especially if you guys are totally different. I mean, we're pretty lucky. Like I'm the same size, pretty close to the same size as my teammate. And to reiterate what he's doing, my teammate and I have totally different setups, suspension-wise. But I could ride his sled just fine. He could ride my sled just fine. We try to keep our bars and everything in the same position so that if we do have to swap or do something different, it's not. And again, we're the same size, so it's not as big a deal. We don't have to have different handlebar risers and stuff. But anyways, if you can set them up close to the same, that's probably going to give you an advantage if you have to. I was in a position where my teammate blew a shock, and he was really uncomfortable with riding the suspension. I was less uncomfortable with it, so I was able to jump on his sled. Plus, he was getting wore out, just flat out wore out, where he just really started falling off the pace. And I'm like, hey, I jumped on his sled, and we were able to basically, pick it back up again. So again, just don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to jump on and help your teammate out, because just little things like having a blown suspension, a shock, or something like that, a bent A-arm or something, and, you know, that wears the person out. So you might want to consider, you know, helping your teammate
Just
out.
add one. So, and this is from my role checking in the graph, watching these guys. So I've never, and you see a lot of fights amongst teammates. You wouldn't think it happens as often as it does. It's amazing how often it happens. Your partner is not there to ruin your day. And the stuff you say to each other, and I've said this for a long time, it's more important to pick your iron dog partner than it is your spouse. A lot of these people never talk to each other again, and my rule was always we had to be friends and stay friends for life. But the smoothest coming off I've ever seen is right here in front of me. They come off literally and are talking to each other in a productive manner. Yelling and screaming and throwing stuff at your partner does not help the situation. And yet I've seen it over and over.
I've experienced it.
And I'm saying it in front of the camera and everything, and you wouldn't think it happened, even if you're in the expedition class. Be nice to each other and bolster each other going on. He didn't mean to run into that rock. He didn't mean to do whatever, or she. Be nice to each other and get along. It will go, being stressed out and yelling at each other does not make the situation better.
No.
Do you guys ever have to, like, because you, as a person, and it's maybe switching, but do you ever tell your partner, hey, it looks like we might need to switch machines, like, do you, or would you stay away from that?
I've never been in that scenario, maybe. I've had, like, we do it with communications now. I've had, like, when I say this, and just by saying somebody's leading, that isn't like dominant. There's no way I want to be able to follow. I'm awful at that. I can't be back there. It's like being in a whiteout all the time. It's miserable. I would rather be in the front. There's just learn what works for you. And there is going to usually be, in some dynamics, one person's going to be better at leading and navigating and finding a trail. But as far as just swapping sleds, I don't find ourselves doing that.
I think that, like, if you, like, for instance, a perfect example would be you lose a hot grip. So now your hand's getting cold,
Yeah.
right? That would be more of a scenario where I would say, like, that's the reason why we need to swap. My hand's getting really cold.
Okay.
Let's swap sleds so I can jump on your sled and warm up my hand for a minute.
And I'll say, and this is without getting in trouble too much and giving you too much. So I had some health issues, and it took my partner to be able to say, we got an issue, stop, you need to eat something, and a couple others. And I gotta say, and that is incredibly helpful, and I think it can help both just doing the expedition as well as the other class. But if you're getting low on a sugar level and you're not paying attention, problematic. And the same way, for me, it was pride, where I'm riding a machine that's bent, and finally your teammate says, hey, let's swap out. I think I would be way less, set that bar lower for just saying, let's do it. Riding with my daughter, she's tough and strong, but it's just different male to female, and I think that communication needs to be open, to just say, look, you need a quick break on this part. She's way better at leading. She'll take over, and I will say, you got it, especially if I can't see. If it's wide out, go for it. I'll tag in 20 feet behind you and just stay there. But having that ability to have that conversation is huge in my mind.
So I had I don't know, it always stuck with me. Somebody once told me, and it's stayed pretty accurate on this, like the average race mile per hour is roughly, it's mid-50s, right around 50 miles per hour at the like top end, right? So if you equate that, every minute is 1 mile. So when you talk about efficiencies, like you're more efficient at oil. So if I can be 30 seconds faster at a checkpoint, how many checkpoints are there in the whole race? How many? 23, right? So say I'm 1 minute faster at every checkpoint. I just made up 23 minutes, 23 miles on somebody by being 1 minute faster, more efficient. So that's huge. Try to make up 23 miles on something on a trail. It's a lot harder to do. You're never going to. So those are all, like, those efficiencies all, I tell you not to worry about taking that extra 10, 15 seconds, but it's because you're going to gain it later on about opening pit zips and those stuff. But as you're always thinking about, that's where all these efficiencies come, and that's how you win the races. You're consistent and efficient. It's not as gangbuster fast. It's a lot slower pace race than some of the other.
That's coming from a multi-champion. If you try and keep that pace for the race, you'll be dead. for the 98% of people trying this. And I've said this before, because I've had a partner who ended his career over this race. So that's coming from a multi-winning person says, that's the speed I get, that's the average.
It's your comfort level.
For a lot of the people to go out there and say, and I gotta tell you, I was one of the people, you say, I'm not as fast on the trail part, but I'm gonna catch up on the mythical river. On the flat stuff, you will not. Get it out of your mind. You will not catch up on the river. You're not getting catch up on the other part. You've got to be on your game and good the whole time to be talking about a top podium finish. So the goal is, if you're in this room, if you're listening on the camera, to finish the race and to be bodily intact, because there's people that get hurt and end their careers with this kind of stuff. But the fact that us morons can sign up for it and race with these guys is what keeps me coming back.
All right, we'll get into checkpoints and layovers. They kind of hit, make sure you guys understand what the difference is on the different, there's, express checkpoints, layovers, what a checkpoint is. Make sure you understand that. A couple things I can tell you. My very first year, I remember we came into McGrath, and that year it was like one of those years where they had never broken I would consider is now the trail on the river. So it went on the road, which we're not supposed to take. But that year, that was the only trail there was. Everybody went on the road. So we get out there. Well, what we didn't realize is since we came in on the road, we came into town. Asked the checker, hey, how do we get out of here? This is as we get off our layover. We're like, how do we get out of here? They're like, oh, just head down to the river and follow the stakes out of here. Well, since we didn't come up that way, didn't realize that there was stakes coming in and stakes coming out. We get on the river, and the first stake we see is taking us back towards Nikolai. So here we are running down the river. I'm looking at my GPS, and I see that it's like it starts. You're on this river that literally will do like 180 degrees. So you're just looking at it, going like, we're going away from this. We're going away from it. Oh wait, we're going back. Wait, we're going away. We're going away. Finally realized. Anyways, long story short, wasted a lot of time because we had no idea how to get out of there. So make sure you can ask for directions when you get to a checkpoint if you're not really familiar with it. Most of the checkpoints, there's pretty good. The volunteers do a really well job of marking how to get in. It's not a definite. There's plenty of places that don't have stuff, but for the most part, it's pretty easy to follow.
If you got to, there is a couple, I would say, confusing wise, maybe, is like Nikolai can be a little bit, McGrath. But another one gets some people is even cruising down the Yukon, because you're going to go by the Kaika to go there, which people live up it, and there's going to be staking. Sometimes there's going to be cross staking. If you have to, there's going to be multiple trails, and some of them will be staked. Iron Dog stakes are orange and have the Iron Dog stamped on them. Try to take, if you have to and you're confused, like try to look at that. Slow down enough to go, okay, this is it. Because as well as you go past the Kaikuk, you're going to go into Nolato. Nolato is going to, they've always been really good these last few years staking where the Iron Dog goes by. Because there's going to be cross trails. What a lot of those are is going out to woodlots or locations that locals are getting their fire.
Yeah, trapping.
So whatever's going on over there, and there will be you'll see some green stakes. Don't follow the green stake. Follow to try to take that second, and guarantee this: your GPS does not lie. Like trust that thing. I've heard people like we've been in White House, like I didn't believe that was right, and I'm like, no, that's why you were lost. I'm a pilot. From a pilot stance, like trust your instruments there that you have. That thing is not lying to you. So
yeah, and when he's talking about on the Yukon, the Koyukuk, that it's not bad when you're going northbound because it tucks in behind you, so you really have to almost do like the 180. But on the way back, it can really, like if you're up against Nolato there, and you stay to the left of Nolato, that trail is going to lead you right up to Koyukuk.
ask your dad. I'm pretty sure he took that the wrong time.
Yeah, a lot of people have done it, especially like I said, especially when you get to Nolato, you stay on that. If you're on the bank where Nolato's at, and you're heading southbound, like I said, the main trail will lead you right up that. So the Iron Dog Trail is typically a little bit further out and it kind of bypasses that. And like I said, the last 5-6 years it's been very well marked, but you know, again, just something to be aware of.
There should be no reason you're not out there with a GPS track. Somebody will give you, I will give anybody a GPS track. If you need at least a baseline one, like of where it is. You have no reason to be on this trail without, from Big Lake all the way to Kotzebue and Nome, all that, some sort of map to like, this is the direction I'm going. So have that on your GPS.
Kind of talked about a little bit about, you know, be careful of misinformation. When you get there, there's going to be a lot of people and they're going to be spouting off all kinds of stuff. I mean, it's pretty crazy between you're not going to be able to make it, the conditions are horrible, to, and then the exact opposite, you know, where they're saying, oh, there's no problem, and it's, you know, fresh ice or whatever the conditions. So you got to be really careful, kind of take everything that you hear with a grain of salt. You know, again, maybe pay attention to what the front runners are doing or where they're going if you can. I mean, the very first year we had the same thing. We got to Shaktoolik. You know, back then we used to have to stop at Shaktoolik. And we got to Shaktoolik and they're like, oh, don't cross the ice, it's horrible. Don't cross the ice, it's horrible. Well, not only was it horrible, it was it wasn't horrible, but the conditions were horrible. We couldn't see 5 foot in front of us. We'd never been up there. I'd never been on Norton Bay my entire life. And we get down, we're just looking at the GPS, and we get on the sea ice, because this is the main trail. We don't see any other trail that goes around, so we're on this main trail, and you know, we're going 5-10 mile an hour. Like, I'm literally looking at the front of my bumper waiting for open water, because they told us it was all open water. So I'm just going. Well, we get out there and about halfway across, or actually about a quarter of the way across the ice, got on the main trail, and some guy was there, we saw him, and got back on the main trail, and it was good the whole way. So it's like, again, take everything that you hear with a grain, but make sure you ask questions, ask multiple people, because like I said, you'll get different answers from everybody and try and make your best decision you can.
There's a lot of what like people like Chris and I have, we've been doing these 20 years, but you're going to start to build like your network of reliable sources at all these. That is an advantage to what we have doing this for 20 years. I know the people I'm going to talk to in Unicely, in Koyak, in all these places. You're going to get that over time. That's just one of the faults of, unfortunately, being a rookie. You're going to find out, all right, there's a guy every year that I'm at a certain checkpoint, it's like, do not go out there.
Yeah,
I'm going out there.
and there's multiple.
You know, it's part of it, and that's part of, like, embrace it, get to know that. That's one of the best things about this race are those friendships, those encounters, all these people that you get to start seeing along this path, and then year after year is phenomenal, and it's great. And, you know, and I say that people are going to say that and take it with a grain of salt. Embrace that on that side, and don't take it as there being a hindrance to you. Like, it's just that's their view on it, and these people out there are, it's what makes this race go on and on every year. So
I think also with that, I mean, you'll definitely get, I mean, there's a couple spots I can think of. Every year they tell you to go someplace that's a long way. So it's, you know, to give somebody that's maybe a local racer there an advantage. I mean, they used to even do that out at Galena. They used to put us up against the bank where it was like the roughest part of the trail. And so again, you got to kind of, it's just something you'll learn and maybe get some information if you can get information. They don't do that anymore, but that was pretty common. You know, so that's what I said. You gotta kind of take some of that.
know your layovers, build a
Yep.
plan. Build
Yep.
a plan of what you think you're gonna do and be prepared for it to totally get thrown out the window. But at least kind of build a plan and like, build it in your head and thinking, all right, we're gonna get here roughly in this time. That's what I'm capable of doing. I guess now I've ran it enough. I know like, all right, I know what time we should be at McGrath, and I know roughly if everything was going well, how many hours of layover I would take. I know what time I'd leave there and where I should be every single checkpoint through it. I could run through it in my head right now and tell you every one of those lakes. You're gonna get there, but like build that on a piece of paper and kind of say, all right, this is, even do some research. Get on there and see what some of the top teams were, maybe what the middle, where you think you might be rider-wise. Like, figure out, all right, this is gonna take me, it's gonna take me 8 hours to get to McGrath. It's gonna take me 10 hours to get to McGrath. That's when I should be here if I'm doing that all right, and then you can kind of have that as a reference. That works for me. And then it keeps a plan going in your mind, what you're doing, you're moving on a good pace.
I think everybody's goal, like the first day, is to try and go to McGrath. I mean, you can, obviously, and this is for the pro class, you want to try and get to McGrath. That's not to say that you can't do good stopping ahead before that, but I really highly recommend getting to McGrath. I think if everything's going good too, I mean, something else that we've learned in the past that, you know, weather's good, you're feeling good, you made a plan to stop someplace, you know, if you're still feeling good, everything's flowing, keep going. The more miles you can get on that day, it just makes it easier later on, right? So if things are going good, you know, but if things aren't going good and you need to stop and regroup, stop. So, and things change. I mean, all it takes is one broken part that maybe you don't have with you that's gonna force you to lay over a place that you never planned on laying over. But that's not a big deal. I mean, it's gonna happen. You're gonna have to learn to roll with it.
It's not necessarily like, don't feel either like with that, like you need to go change the pace of it and be like, I want to get out and lead this race. If you've never been out there, like, and you're in a position, you're like, oh, I'm going to take a 3-hour less layover so I can lead the next, might not be the smartest thing. Like, it does happen if people try that just out of a pride thing, like they want to go do it. I wouldn't suggest that.
I think you hit a key point. If you're going to go the first day to McGrath, you need to train to McGrath at least once.
Should.
I mean, even if you don't do that, you need to try and get a day in that's that big, you know? Even though it's not.
You can train to McGrath. Training to McGrath and racing to McGrath, I don't care how you do it, it's going to be different.
Right. But you got to get in your mind of that, how long that first day is.
You're going to find yourself, when you're talking checkpoints, you're going to be like, oh, cow, and then you're going to be looking at like your dash, like, all right, it's been 50 miles since I left this checkpoint, it's still 20 to get to Nikolai, and then it's like, holy cow, it's still 15, and then it's still 14. That's for me, like, if I didn't have a reference on those early on, they're going to feel like a long way.
It's going to feel like forever.
Farewell Burn, just for the first few years, I always felt like it never ended. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
that's the longest 70 miles ever.
For me, I got the Burn to Nikolai, from Tina to Nikolai, and then also from Ophir to
Ophir to
Foreman.
Foreman.
Those, it's 100 miles, and it's
a long ways.
a long ways. I mean, I'm actually glad that they don't have the markers up like they used to. They used to have like markers every 5 or 10 miles, and it would just piss you off because you're like, feels like we've been going for 2 hours. We made freaking 5 miles on this trip, you know. So you know, those are just kind of slower sections, and it so mentally just gets to you.
Sign of something before we get off on this, and it's kind of interesting too, is if you haven't been out there and never, so when you leave Rome, out of Rome, there's a cabin in Rome, but then there's shelter cabins. You start seeing like 20, I think it's 25 miles out of Nikolai, there's a shelter cabin. They're actually beautiful log cabins. You're gonna start seeing these strategically along the race outside of Nikolai, then outside of McGrath. There's nothing going between McGrath and Ophir because you got Takotna, but then out of Ophir, about roughly 30 miles out of Ophir is what they call the No-Co crossing. There's a shelter cabin. Then you're going to go it's about another 50 miles, and it's going to be 20 miles from getting to Foreman. There's another cabin that you're going to go by. That's a shelter cabin. These are things like in a bad scenario, just know that they're out there. And there is markers on those that are saying shelter cabin in so many miles. Those continue on. We get back into those outside of Caltag. There's one about 20 miles out of Caltag. Then you get another one that's roughly 30 miles out of Uniclete. It's what they call Old Woman. And then another side of Uniclete going towards Shack. There's one about halfway in between there. So just something to know that there is some of these shelter cabins out there, and they're pretty clearly marked. Like as you're going with, it tells the mileage to them.
And if you go on the Iron Dog website, they're all listed on the website.
Oh, are they? Okay.
Even up around the Cotswold are listed.
Okay.
So you talked about the race, the pro class is going to go all the way to McGrath probably, but
Yeah.
traditionally the adventure class or the trail class goes to Fontilla, but now how does that work in with the, they don't use Puntill anymore, they use
Yeah, you
Whiskey
go to
Bravo.
Puntill.
They go to Puntillo for
What's
sure.
that?
Yeah, fuel up at Whiskey Bravo and then you go to Puntill.
Okay,
First day is where everybody goes.
That's what we did last year in our expedition, and
Yeah.
you just gotta make the reservations and they have to expect you.
yeah, yeah, okay, I just didn't know, my son was asking, you know.
So this is.
Expedition class should all plan on rainy path spots the first year.
Yeah,
Unless your practice is moved to the pros and you may want to look at it.
Something interesting. This took me 18 years of doing the race before I learned this. I can share it with you guys so you don't have to learn part of it. So you'll find out, a lot of this trail is marked by Iditarod, right? So they have a marking scheme, right? You'll see the little triangles on the, they're not even like a triangle, they're kind of like a
Egg shape.
egg shape. So an egg that's pointing straight up, or an egg standing up, that means the trail goes straight. The eggs turn, that means the trail turns. That's how they're marking it. They actually mark the corners in it. So as you get into tight spots and say it snowed a bunch, there is a scheme to how they're moving their little egg shape. That tells you left, right, straight, where the trail should be. So, as you're out there training,
You just thought they were just
practicing,
throwing up crooked for years?
I just assumed they were, yeah, I don't know. Well, there's reflectors to the, on it. When you're out breaking trail early on, like now, this time of year, I'm trying to find the trail, we know where it's at pretty good, but it's still a good reference. Like you can get even in there so zoomed in, you're like, is it kind of left around this tree or what? And they'll mark it. That's what they're marking for the turn. You get very used to looking for those at nighttime in bad weather, is looking for that reflector. Trust me, they're a great sign. Go in the right direction.
You know, layovers, make sure you guys read the layover sections. The layovers are a little bit complicated, kind of. I mean, they're not, but when you're reading them the first time and try to understand what you can do, the layovers have changed. You know, every couple of years they change, so you gotta make sure you understand the layovers and what you can do. And these guys were talking about, you know, being able to go off the clock and then, or on the clock and then go and come back and stuff like that. Again, understand what all that means. And figure out what those layovers mean, so you're not confused and you're not just figuring it out in the race. A lot of times when it comes to like layovers and stuff as a rookie, you know, sometimes it is best to do what you know, if everybody's laying over in front of you, there might be a reason why. Sometimes not necessarily. I can tell you the first year I did it, everybody laid over in Uniclete. We thought it was dumb and we just kept going, and it actually worked to our advantage. So I'm not saying 100% of the time that you have to do exactly what the guys in front are doing in the pro class, but there's probably a reason why some of the guys might be stopping. Just something to be thinking about, you know, that you might want to maybe understand what that is. And the nice thing is the way that we have layovers now is you can shake a short layover. So before, when we used to have to stay for a half a day or whatever, that's totally different. Now you can stay for an hour trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Why is everybody staying? You can at least get that information before you take off. Especially if like everybody's stopped and you're the team that's coming through and you mentally prepared to keep going and everybody stopped. You might want to find out what's going on. Why did everybody stop? Especially if it's in the middle of the day and it's sunny out, there's probably a reason why that's happening. So,
Back to markers, Tyler. Probably important for this group. For the last 3, maybe 4 years now, 5 years, we put together 5,000 LAF that get sent out to checkpoints. So in ground snowstorm or fog or whiteout, whatever, the Iron Dog sticks that get sent out have Iron Dog stamped on them with a reflective diamond gold sticker around the middle. So should you get lost to the point of that trail goes this way and it's staked, I'm going to tell you that if it doesn't have Iron Dog on it, you're on the wrong trail.
yeah, it can be staked really well. So, but sometimes, like I said, you can't necessarily rely on it all the time. But and then sometimes people do use the Iron Dog stakes for their own little expedition. Sometimes that has happened. So just be careful. But for the most part, you know, you can kind of rely on those things. And I remember the first time, one of the first years we did it, I remember the stakes and the tripods going up and over. I remember thinking, wow, why are these things spread out so far? I said, why are they so close together? It's like You know, they're literally 50 feet apart. And then I remember coming back when you couldn't see 5 foot in front of you, you're like, why aren't these things closer together? You know? So
I don't know how tech savvy everybody is. From my perspective, I mean, I deal with this all the time in my job, so I'm used to it, but as well as mapping. Mapping software nowadays is so intuitive to be able to use, even just simple as a KMZ. So you can take that GPS file that you gather on there, you can export that really easily into something, and then put it into Google Earth. Look at that overlay, look at those, zoom in, all right, this is Nikolai. They told me Nikolai is confusing. You can look at where that track is and see exactly where you should be, and maybe build those references in your mind about this is what it should look like as I'm coming into here, this is what it should look like this road, and get used to that. And then when it becomes there, you're like, oh, visually, all right, I know where this is at. I leave McGrath. You're going to come into there visually. You know, you're going to come in on this river. You're going to come up to the bank. When I leave there, I'm not going to go straight across the river and go into the woodlot. I'm going to go up the river because that's what, you know, and look at that. You can kind of start to build that and do that at each one of those locations along the trail. It could help you immensely. Maybe clear some of that confusion. Same with those locations we were talking about on the Yukon. They're pretty clearly marked where Nulato Village is and the Kaikuk and all these locations. You could see that and be like, it's a very prominent point, that one that we're talking about that not scare people getting lost at the Kaikuk. It's a big point that comes out, and it's a prominent point. There's always people sitting there. Remember that. There's a big group of people sitting there. They're sitting there for, you know, there's a reason.
Yeah.
One, it's usually rough, or there's something there, that, or they're, you know, it's a split in the trail. And take the time to give a little extra attention to that. That's why.
Yep. Something to think about too is, you know, one thing that a lot of guys will say, especially people that have never raced this race before, when we come into a checkpoint layover, we come to the checkpoints, in most of the villages, I actually should say most, all the villages love to have iron doggers. And we want to keep it that way. We want to keep it, they welcome us with open arms, they put us up, they help us out. Everybody's just absolutely phenomenal, and most people will say that's their favorite part of the whole thing is, you know, being able to lay over in a village and be in there. It's just, it's an awesome experience. So with that being said, make sure, again, we respect everybody there. A lot of people don't expect money. Some people do when you stay with them. You know, we always try and, even if they tell us that we don't want money, we stage money. I would say at a minimum, if people even say they don't want any money, you know, drop them $100.
That's
$100
a
per
minimum.
person.
I'll be
$100,
honest.
yeah.
Even if they say not, $100 per person, even if you're staying there for 6 hours, that's our thing. Do that.
We do the same
They
thing.
kick their kids out of their house and give you their bed for whatever, make them sleep down at the school. They're
Well, I think it just comes down to treat them how you want to be treated.
yeah, I mean it's pretty impressive what how supportive they
It's
are.
awesome. It's really awesome. So, anyways, just be thinking about that. Same with like any place that you might, like there might be like a commercial available. You might be thinking about now, if you're planning on, you know, staying somewhere, you might want to start making reservations. If you haven't made reservations already, you might want to start making reservations now. I mean, Nome is pretty big. Believe it or not, that place it fills up pretty quick during Iron Dog, and the rooms are hard to find.
I can tell you
not
for
staying with
Nome.
somebody.
For Nome, we were there, Rachel and I were there the first week of November, and the hotel was completely booked.
Yeah.
We didn't even get rooms.
So.
Yep.
So yeah, so you might be thinking about that now. If you haven't thought about it, it's something you need to be thinking about now.
Well, they're an Iron Dog for sure. It's already filled up. Because a month ago I tried to make reservations and
So the best thing for Nome is to go on to the community center. They're supposedly posting Airbnb locations or other rooms that are available with family. And then for races that are going in the pro class to the Kotzebue Loop, I believe we have 25 rooms on hold at the hotel in Kotz for you to get a discounted rate should you want to stay there at Kotzebue.
So yeah, you'd be thinking about that now. Like I said, lots of times you'll show up in a village. It's usually not as big of a deal if you show up and you weren't planning on staying there. I mean, if you can pre-work something out, some of the places do have bed and breakfasts. You know, you can work that out ahead of time. But I would say, you know, most places I wouldn't sweat too much if you show up. Most people would put you up. So, but But if there's places that have commercially available spots, places like, I think even Ruby and Galena do, might want to be thinking about those now.
Reach out, Caltech's kind of one that's not, there's not as many B&Bs, but I know they love to like support and have people stay there.
Yeah.
They're big into it. Galena's pretty easy, Ruby is easy. McGrath, Tusca House is where everybody stays for the most part there.
Yep. When you get to Nome, Nome's the halfway point. You want to hit that one a little bit. A couple things that you need to be thinking about. One is you'd be able to work on your sled there, so you can kind of do some of your deferred maintenance. But I also think it's a great place to get your machine up at 100% where it needs to be. There's been a couple years where if you're fortunate enough to have a plane follow you, that's great, but you can't rely on a plane, right? I mean, the weather, the last 5 years, four or so years, having a plane means that you really don't have a plane because it just hasn't been able to follow us because of the weather. So, something to be thinking about if you don't have a plane, pre-staging parts, materials, clothes and stuff. Nome was a big one. I remember showing up in 2006. Like I said, that was the year that I got kind of thrown into it, so there was no pre-planning ahead of time. And we got to Nome, and we didn't have any street clothes, no nothing. And then so you're walking around in your money boots and your riding clothes the whole time. So you might want to consider, things like belts, carbides. There is dealers up there that you can buy some, maybe pre-buying stuff in Nome that that you're going to use. Like I said, if you know that you want belts, if you're planning on getting belts, go ahead and pre-buy that stuff and have it ready for you when you get there, instead of having to worry about shipping something up. Things that you might not be able to get up there, I would highly recommend maybe shipping up a box of clothes, some street clothes, so you're comfortable. I mean, you're going to be there, 20 to 30, 35 hours there. You're going to want to have some street clothes, some clothes to work on your sled, so you're not just in your your riding gear the whole time and all you have is your
It sucks to be walking around
It
in your
does.
boots and stuff.
It sucks to be, if that's the only thing you have is your boots and you want to get them dry. So, again, you might want to do that. Same thing with like McGrath. Like a lot of guys, like staging parts and certain, you might want to think about, I've seen more people, most people will scratch before McGrath. I mean, that's like just, when you go through the buffalo town, when you're in the burn, people go way too fast. They'll bounce off a tree. It's usually not the first tree that gets you, it's the second one. Because you hit the first tree and then you're freaking in the trees and you'll rip off an AR or do something like that. So if you were sending parts, I would say Nikolai or McGrath was a great place. McGrath really, because that's where you're probably going to stay. You can have some extra clothes. You can have some extra parts like front end parts and stuff staged there at McGrath. So just something to be thinking about, and you can do that all along the trail, and or find people that live there that might have some parts and pieces, so you kind of already know ahead of time if you're going to have, hey, is there one of these sleds that we can get parts off of, in a village or this town or whatever. If you can already do that, then you're not going to be so stressed about having a part for your sled.
And if you need parts within reason, get them in a tote. I mean, I don't want 100-pound totes, but if you got some parts of the street clothes like these guys mentioned, and you get them to us at the office, we'll ship them with our stuff in the next 30 days. So there'll be a box in Nome that says whatever, Chris and Tyler on it. I mean, our board member will hang on to it for you there and get it to you if you get there. But within reason, we'll help you get as much around as possible as we start shipping in the next probably 4 weeks.
Yeah, so make sure you guys.
I don't want to show up there with like 20 totes and say, I need one to go to every checkpoint. We'll help.
Money for trading, make sure you guys are carrying some cash. I mean, again, if there's a machine there's going to be some people that are going to say, they're willing to give you parts off the machine. Don't expect those parts for free. And make sure that when again, we want to be able to get help in the future, so make sure you're replacing those parts. Give them some money for letting them borrow their parts. Make sure you have some cash so you can do that for horse trading. Anything else on? You guys have any questions on checkpoints or anything?
do you recommend when we, like, let's say we broke a shock out there, we bought it from them, we got it from them. Would you recommend when we get back to town to send them another shock because, and then, you know, just call it good like that, or,
It just depends on the circumstances, but
circumstance?
yeah. Like, in other words, they're giving you a used part, you're giving them a brand new part. I would say that's a pretty fair trade, but they also have to put it back on, so there's time involved with that. So, you know,
It's kinda
maybe
fair.
give them a little bit of money, take care of them, and you know, just make sure that they're fair, that they feel that everything's
If
fair.
it's something that's specific to that they like need back, this is something they may let you use it and say, here's a couple $100 or 100, whatever it may be, and then make sure that gets back to them, because there could be something that it's like it needs to be back to them, if it's specific to theirs. It's just, I think the gist of it is if you take something, borrow something from them, there's been in the past things that have not gotten returned, and it leaves, you know,
Bad taste in
bad
their mouth.
taste, yeah, then people are, I don't want to do this,
Well, what they end up doing is they call the Iron Dog office and say, hey, whatever, Team 66 took this shock from me and it's now in July and we still don't got it back.
Yeah.
Can you help us track Team 66 down to get, I mean, we don't want to be in the middle of your negotiations.
Yeah, don't do that. Don't let it go that far. You know, I think, you know, safety should be first, so when it comes to this, you know, where you lay over, like if there's things that are going wrong, like I said, just, you know, even if you weren't planning on it, maybe lay over. Like I said, the rules are nice now, you can take an hour layover, 2-hour layover, get warm, do whatever you need to do, get something to eat, get your head right so that you're good. You know, safety's first, remember, you're here, you know, your race partner, your family, friends, sponsors, spectators, they're all supporting you guys, so be smart out there. Move on to sled preparation. Oh, actually holds, real quick. You know, they'll hold us in, where are we getting hold? I don't even know where we're getting held at. Whiskey Bravo, we're getting held at, so.
return?
Yeah. So we'll be in Whiskey Bravo, and then you guys will, you know, be a little bit different, so then that way, that's where you guys are gonna go. They'll basically just get you off the clock, so it's kind of like a layover, just a little bit different. They usually let you, the difference on a holdover is that you can warm up your sled because it's retreated as you're still on the clock when you come off the, so they basically will let you warm up like if you never stopped, right? So it's a little bit different than a normal layover. So keep that in mind also, that it's treated different than a hold is different than a layover.
Can you work on
And
your
they do it
sled?
different in different spots.
Can you work on your sled on a hold?
No. Can't work on your
That's
sled.
only one hold, right? Well, no.
Well, there's cost of you also, and that one's different, because they were saying we're getting, even though that one's considered a hold, you get fuel on the clock. Where Whiskey Bravo, I believe we'll be getting it off the clock. And again, it's different every year, so you gotta do something, again, I'm just trying to make you aware that it's just different. So kind of.
If you try to work on something, trust me, somebody will let you know.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah. I mean, heck, even some people will be like, people are even looking at your machine, they're like, he's looking at it wrong. But, you know, looking at your machine's fine as long as you're not touching it. But some people will freak out that you're even looking at your machine.
That's the rule. You can look, but you can't touch.
Exactly. You know, sled preparation, add-on,
Well, so let's clarify.
yes.
So the rule change this year, to your point, yes. The known garage is off limits this year because last year, theoretically, you got a 15-minute time frame to review what's wrong with your sled and make notes and get ready for the work session. Last year, there were multiple teams that were looking but not touching while other teams were working, but writing notes down and doing outside of the 15-minute window. So unfortunately, we're going back to the garages off limits other than.
Yeah, but if you want to lay on the side and look at your snow machine, like say McGrath's a perfect one,
You're great, yes.
sitting there, if you want to look at it, yep. You're not touching, you just don't touch it.
Yeah. And if you need to look at something, I mean, if you're having a problem, that's another thing. I would highly recommend, if you're having any issues whatsoever, you feel something weird in the skid, so try and figure that out before you go off the clock. Try and figure that out so that now when you're off the clock, you can be rounding up parts. So your skid, something doesn't feel right, but it literally happened right down the road from getting where you're going. Yeah, tip that thing over, look what's wrong. Hey, we need to replace this, And I know you're in a hurry, but make sure you don't forget anything while you're doing it. You want to make sure that you get everything so that when you go off, now you can go off the clock and say, hey, we need a shock, these bushings, shock rods, we need all these parts, we can round those up now while we're off the clock. So I would highly recommend don't wait until you go back on the clock. When you go back on the clock, you've lost your opportunity. The other thing too is that when you know what you need when you go off the clock, there are some places that have commercial airports, and I have personally done this before, where we were able to catch a flight from Fairbanks to get it to us on the Yukon, and they had parts for us when we went back off on the clock. So don't procrastinate when it comes to working on your sled or looking at your sled. Make sure you know what it is before. Make sure you know what you need before you go off the clock. Also going back to Nome, that 15-minute, make sure you guys are looking at everything, write everything down. I wouldn't wait too long to do your inspection there. You want it to thaw out, but at the same time, there's Gold Streaks from Anchorage. You can get parts in Nome. But if you wait too long, you're going to lose that opportunity to get parts brought up to you, and then you're working on your sled the night before you go back on the clock, and it's just, don't procrastinate. Just when you get there, let it thaw out and go inspect it as soon as possible. Preferably the day you get in, that day you should be doing it. If you get in pretty late that night, I mean, the very first thing in the morning, you need to be inspecting your sled and making sure, because you will find things that you didn't know was wrong with your sled. So
We have to check on the morning and get everything. Yeah, do something.
you schedule, in the past, again, I didn't read the rules in that sense, but typically when you get there, you don't have to tell them right then and there or anything, but call them up, schedule your inspection, and you can get there and inspect. Then you're also going to have to let them know ahead of time when you're going to work on your sled. And again, I would highly recommend not procrastinating to the last minute to work on your sled, because it's the same thing. While you're working on your sled, you might find another problem, and the sooner you realize these things, the sooner you can get parts and get things fixed. Okay, going back to sleds and setups and stuff like that. Testing, I'm beating this into your head. Make sure you guys are testing with what you think you're going to be riding. Just test. It's the only way you're going to make things right. Break-in miles on these new sleds is a lot different. If you're fortunate enough to have new practice sleds and new race sleds, and everybody's in a different, state of how they're racing and riding and stuff like that. But I highly wouldn't recommend just, starting up your machine and with no miles on it and taking off from the race. Make sure these things are broke in, 100 miles, 200 miles. Some of them require more break-in than others. I know some of them, they actually have, the computers have a break-in mode. Some of them you want them to get out of break-in mode beforehand. I know, like with our sleds in the past, like they burn more oil, so you got to be aware of that you might not get as far. As you've been training all year on a sled that's got 2,000 miles, 3,000 miles, that thing's probably going to get better oil mileage than when you first start up your machine. It's not going to get as good of oil because it's dumping more oil in there. So keep that in mind. But I don't know what it is but I would say between 100 and 200 miles minimum for break-in. I don't know with your guys' sleds.
Yeah, I usually do about 100 and some miles on them.
Yeah. But make sure you're making sure that it's good to go. And then also don't make, like I said, you can learn from my experience. Make sure it's just set up, you go out and ride it, just like it's going to the starting line. Suspension's good, everything's set up so you're not monkeying with stuff as you go.
It's gonna ride different. The fact that Nick and I sleds are identical to what I'm practicing on today is 100% what I'm gonna race. By the time I get to the race and I've been practicing on it, things have 3,000-4,000 miles on it. It's getting a little looser. It's gonna feel different than I hop on that brand new sled and break in for the race. That thing's brand new, tight, everything's just, they're not gonna feel the same. It's gonna loosen up and they're gonna get similar, but just don't get caught up. And then I highly suggest, run the thing. Don't baby it. Like, I've actually had years that I blew my sled up. I had a year I blew it up right on the Entner River. We probably would have blown it up if I would have ran it hard in training. I mean, break your sled in appropriately, but don't be afraid to go out there and hold it wide open. Because you know what you're going to do the first day in the race? You're going to go across Big Lake wide open, and you're going to throw that, out the window from, I didn't want to hold it wide open. do that before, do it the week, 2 weeks before, or however really like, certain people are not gonna have their sleds done a month ahead of time, you know. I'm on track for my race sled should be done in probably 2 weeks. It'll be, other than small little things, it'll be, I'm not call you out. You did that yourself. But that's, and it's totally preference of what people want. There'll be always these little tweaks of things you're gonna change maybe right before. But if you can get that big component stuff out of the way, you get a lot less stress. That week before the race, I usually don't ride. I'm just kind of hanging out. I go to the gym. Maybe I might do a fun ride here or there, but I'm not stressing out, sitting in the shop till midnight. And especially the night before the race, I'm not. Like, that thing's packed up, ready multiple days early. That's my approach.
Yeah, the sooner you can get it, the sooner that you train and actually break, like I said, break in your, you know, we multiple years, even last year, we had an issue. Everything seemed good on our sleds, but we ended up going for a little night ride and discovered that I'll cut to the chase, we had a battery that was bad. We didn't know that. We went riding, everything was fine, but then we went for an evening ride, like this was like the night before the race. We just went to go, just make sure everything was good for the next day, and the light wasn't, like Ryan's light wasn't working. Well, we were up late the night before the race trying to troubleshoot what it was, and it ended up, like I said, just being a battery. But to get to that conclusion, you know, again, you can get this stuff done earlier. Like I said, we actually broke our sleds in and stuff quite a bit earlier than that, but discovered that that didn't work literally the night before the race. So, you know, things to think about for accessories and stuff. I know some people like mirrors on their sleds, not necessarily so you can really watch what people are doing behind you, but maybe so you don't have to look all the way around. I can tell you I have a really bad habit when I'm a leader. I have a really bad habit. As soon as I turn and start looking, I ride just like this, and I'll just go right off the trail. So if you could have just a quick visual reference, you can see a headlight or whatever. Something to think about. I don't do that, but I know a lot of guys that do, and it's very effective. You know, radios is another one. Having radios. They were talking about like the 7S display or some of these GPSs that have buddy tracking. You can actually look ahead and make sure someone's following you, or you can, you know, mic up and say, hey, you back there, so you don't have to look back so much. I mean, neck can get sore looking back all the time.
You guys ever see, I don't know if you guys looked at a lot of Iron Dog sleds and all the paint marker on the rail, like lines. Do you know what that's for?
Bolts.
Right? You can now, as I'm saying, that visual tracking McGrath, instead of me having to go around and put a wrench on something, I can look there and be like, all right, this is marked out. It didn't move. I know it's not loose. If it is moved, it's an issue. What else is really, like, you're in snow, really bad sign when you're looking over your skid or anything on that snowmobile is black.
Just making
I mean, you're making metal, right? I mean, something's moving. You got a bunch of black snow or black built up around like a torque arm or something. Give that some attention. Something's loosening up. You're building metal from something. So it's a dead giveaway.
So when it comes to like sled setups, we're not going to go into individual brands and what you need to do. As a Polaris, I've been racing Polaris my entire life. If you're riding a Polaris, you can come see me. I'm an open book. Probably won't give you my valving, but I'll give you pretty much anything to make sure that you finish the race. A lot of stuff that we do to our sleds is not necessary to make the race. The sleds that are being built now are so good that you can do this race with minimal work. But I'll tell you what we do to make sure. I call them insurance policies for, you know, extra bracing and stuff like that to make sure that it's going to make it without any, you know, if you hit something hard, that's when something can get tweaked. But you know, like I said, you can get with me. I think Tyler's pretty open. You guys can find somebody. If you're on an Arctic Cat, good luck. I'm sure there's going to be some people. I mean, the biggest thing is no matter what brand you're on, including Arctic Cats, you're just going to have to just do the best you can with trying to get information on what's working and what's not working. You know, like with the Skidoos and the Polarises. I mean, they've been our motor changed this year, so there's a lot of unknowns, really, to be honest with you. So we're in the same boat. It's not until people are really riding and getting a bunch of miles on it before we know exactly what it even means. So just make sure you're trying to get as much information as you can. You know, no questions dumb, and, you know, it was kind of brought, I think Tim brought it up, you're gonna ask the question to, you know, 15 different veterans, and you're gonna get 15 different answers. So, you know, really you are better off to just ask a bunch of people and see what they've done to their sleds or what they're doing and what works for them, and come up with a conclusion of what you think would be best for you. Make sure that you're not packing your sled the night before the race. Make sure that all the correct, you know, all this mandatory stuff that we have has to fit on your sled. Again, we ride ours pretty close to the same, so I know all my stuff fits. But again, you don't want to find out the night before the race that your sleeping bag, your extra clothes, all the tools that you never planned on taking, all this stuff starts growing substantially, and now all of a sudden it's like, oh shoot, we should take this, oh shoot, we should take that. Now you're starting to really add a bunch of weight to your sled, and you're really going to be bummed when you find out that you can't fit it all in the bags that you had made. So
Don't second guess yourself. Like, don't do that the day before.
Yeah.
Like, be prepared enough not to think. You're gonna have a tendency to think, oh shoot, I want to throw this in. Well, what if? And you're gonna have it running through your mind. If you prepped it, and you've been having all this stuff with you all year, and you're good with it, you got to say enough's enough, and I'm going with this, right? And just own that and go with that, and don't start. As soon as you're throwing it all off, like, oh, I think maybe I should throw a couple more of these in there. Or this could be. Try to avoid that thinking. Like, that's.
yeah. And most of the manufacturers, they've got a lot of factory bags. You know, just things like a handlebar bag or a, you know, goggle bag. Just these different bags that maybe you're not used to using. Again, maybe try them out, see if they work for you. You know, you can put a little stuff in little compartments and instead of having one big bag that everything's in. Plus, it's easier to find stuff if it's.
Think about where you put your weight, right? Am I gonna put my 15-pound bag of tools up on top of my hood, like on top of the, that makes sense? Probably not. I'm gonna wanna get it like, you wanna get it down low, you wanna get it to, it's gonna sit there and pound on the hood if you know, or on the, like for our instance, it'd be a glove box that we have up front, we have a lot of storage in there. I'm not gonna put my tools in there. I've been personally, and if nobody, whoever's online, every single one of these little parts that Nick and I have used over the years, where we put a toolbox, of this reinforcement bracket, of the gas tank we use. Sorry to plug for them, but Tri-Jet is producing all that. You can call them, and every single thing for a Skidoo that I use is just tell them that you want it, and they'll build you a whole kit. So anybody on a Skidoo, it's easy on that. And I think they're pretty much that way with Polaris now, and as well with the factory bags. And then like Fine Line Interiors is pretty much building almost everybody's Iron Dog bags for the most part these days. But again, with those tool things, just think where you're putting that stuff, like up on the front in that glove box. That's where I put like my spare goggles and some gloves, some lighter stuff, my tools. Here's another thing with all that, packing this, I actually pack only the bare necessity of some tools. I carry like a 10 millimeter and a set of channel locks and a little Torx is all I carry for a tool on my sled. I carry all the nuts and bolts and all the other things that we need, and that stays down in my little compartment. Nick carries no little components, he carries all the tools. So we split that up equally amongst it, so then I know if we need a part, it's on my sled, if we need a tool, it's on his. And then they're down low, and we know right where they are, I know where the tools are, I know where the stuff is on my sled and his sled.
My last teammate used to say he doesn't carry anything because I carried everything. So, but it's great if you can split stuff up, you know, between the two of you. We're in the same boat. We have certain tools. I also, you know, I have like a tool rack that has the tools. I was really surprised one year we changed out our tunnel, completely built our practice sleds. What I did is I made a conscious effort when I was building my practice sled to don't get in the habit of getting in the toolbox and grabbing an extra wrench to grab more, to grab, you know, what I was doing is I was making a conscious effort to say, hey, I'm going to keep just using these tools that I've got, and that's the only thing I'm going to use. And at the end of my build, I had it laid out, every single tool that it took me to build my sled. And I mean, we stripped them down that year. Like, so we even went as far as changing our tunnels out. So I mean, it was an extensive build that year, and I was really surprised at how, actually, to be honest with you, few tools you actually needed.
So you pack all this?
Yes, well, some, not this, If you want to, but the thing is you want to make sure you have the things that you're going to need. I mean, it's just, you know, unfortunately, there's goofy things like you're going to need some size Allens you might need, some size Torx, you know, an adjustable wrench, some different pliers, screwdrivers. It just depends on what your sled is. Obviously, the more you train, the more you're going to be familiar with your sled, know what you're going to need, especially when it comes to parts and pieces.
Specialty tools are what you need to think of, right? Like a Skidoo takes a flat wrench to get the suspension out. It's probably good somehow or another have something like that on your sled. It's also going to be, that'd be a hard thing to find out there if you needed it, even in a village, to work on it. It's not going to be very accessible. Any other little tools.
Lights, you know, auxiliary lights is a big one. Obviously, pretty much everybody now runs auxiliary lights. There's a billion options and a billion, you know, like I said, everybody has their own preference on how the lights work. You know, so again, ask questions to people, see why they like what they're running. Make sure, I can tell you, on our sleds in the past had pretty weak stators. We couldn't run a lot of extra light. So again, you want to make sure you're not overpowering your electrical system. Like our sleds, the new ones, we're going to be a little bit more. We definitely don't have as much as the Skidoos, but still a lot better. But you want to make sure that you're not overpowering the system. I think that there's been a couple fires that we've seen, and I'm pretty confident that it was based off of running way too much power on lights. So
Practice with the ones like you had, like I can't preach that, like don't throw this extra light on for the race.
yeah.
If you're gonna put it on, like train with it and run that setup. And don't get caught up. Lights are amazing. Don't get caught up in thinking you need 45 different auxiliary lights on that hood. Figure out, like, go back to what your ride schedule should be. And yes, it could get screwed up, and you could be riding at dark more. Today's day and in today's race, we're riding at night a little. And actually, here's this: if in the front, Nikolai McGrath, you're getting to McGrath in the daylight nowadays. You might be a little bit of darkness there. Start the next day, you're running it all fine. You're maybe a little bit, if you go all the way to Unically, a little bit of dark. Next day, you're already in daylight all the way to Cotsview. Then guess what? You leave a little bit of dark out of Cots, near Nome. Leave a little bit of dark and leave a Nome, and then the whole rest of the races, there might be one more, a couple hours in there, and you're in the dark. Like everybody gets so hung up on all these lights, and I'm sorry, this is just my view on it, but you're not riding at the night that often.
A couple things to think about. I mean, in the past, we had to take specific layovers, so we were forced to ride at night. Every year, we were forced.
Yep.
Now, with the way that the layovers are, we can do exactly what he's talking about. We're running in the daylight 90% of the time, 80% of the time. So it's not as big of a deal. Although there's something to think about, sometimes you can see better at nighttime. So sometimes in certain conditions, you might be better off to lay over in the daytime if you can't see. And, you know, and again, you got to be really careful with that, because when it's foggy, it's not necessarily going to be better at nighttime. But if it's snowing and it's hard to see whiteout, again, you got to know those conditions. You might be better off to be running at nighttime, not in the daytime. So, but again, if it's foggy, it's going to be horrible both. Usually the extra light actually could make it worse. So,
Or you're in filmmaker going through Star Wars down the river or
Yes.
something, and the stupid lights are just, you know, you can't even have those lights anyways on, they're too bright, and they shine up. Like I said, there's a lot of opinions on lights, and
yeah. Extra fuel tanks if you're in the pro class, auxiliary fuel. And I really don't care what brand you're running and what the
what should the parents have?
estimated. I think you need to have 5 gallons on the flares. That's just me personally.
Total.
A lot.
So on a Skidoo, just to tell anybody that's on a Skidoo, you should have roughly, with our setup, we're right around 15.5. Like that's 15 is probably fine, that's where we've been, but 15 and a half is, and if you've got a tri-jet tank and a trail tank, that puts you at 15 and a half gallons.
And on the player says you're going to need a couple more than that. And of course, this new motor, we don't know yet. It probably uses more fuel, so.
Understand where your sled uses fuel. Skidoos suck a lot. All these sleds are wide open. It's going to blow your mind. So where people screw up almost every year is Galena to Caltag, I think they say it's 88 miles. It's, more people run out on that section. I can have 15 and a half gallons, we're gonna probably use 15. Like, Yukon, you suck a ton of fuel because it's sitting on the Parks Highway wide open most of the time. Like, it's just, something about it, and there's some grit, there's snow, the type of snow they have, you'll notice
It's
it.
the type of snow, kind of like, it's not really,
There's some aggregate that gets like, some dirt that gets blown into the snow, especially Ruby to Galena as well. Like you'll feel like you'll be going along and all of a sudden it just feels like your sled's slow. Just maybe keep that in your mind now. Your sled's gonna be slow there. It's just the type of snow it is. It drags it down. But you're gonna suck a lot of fuel. On any of the Yukon, I am a firm like fill everything up.
yeah.
Just like you're going to use, that 88 miles is gonna use more than your 100 and plus across over Foreman by far.
Yeah.
You're gonna use it all.
We come in on fumes almost every year on that stretch, so make sure it's filled up. I run out of gas in my first year. I ran out of fuel. My first year of the race, it was a horrible experience. I had to walk about 5 miles or kind of jog for about 5 miles until someone picked me up. Back then, we were allowed to have outside assistance, so there was no issues with that. Some guy picked me up, went and got fuel, had to go get it. My teammate ran out before me, so I was the one left with, I was about 10 miles out of town, and I probably jogged about 5 miles before before they realized we were the first team to come into Tanana. And it was a horrible experience. I've not run out of gas since my first race because of that. I'd rather carry more gas and not run out than to run out. Also,
I ran out on my first race too, so
Yeah.
don't be that guy.
so the other thing too is, a lot of these sleds now they're very efficient. If you're not in the power valves, if you're running slower, they're super efficient. If you're not breaking trail, they'll do pretty well. There's certain snow conditions. Like I said, the Yukon's kind of goofy the way that the snow, the type of snow there, but slow down a little bit.
Do you understand what it means by opening the power valve? Like a Skidoo, they engage at like around 7,000 RPM, so if you keep below that, it doesn't engage the actual power valve on the motor, which they're far more efficient than. So if you stay below, on Skidoo, stay below 7,000 RPM, you're going to be close to 20 miles per gallon. As soon as you engage that, you're going to be down towards 10. I mean, it's a little drastic, but
That's
then
right,
honestly,
that's true, though.
anticipate on the Yukon, we think 5.5 to 6 miles a gallon is about
Yeah.
what we're probably going to see.
So where I'm going with this, a slow ride beats a fast walk any day. So if you think it's going to be, you're not going to make it, just slow down. Also, the other thing too is, again, don't try and outthink the system. And sometimes, the guys in the back want to get up towards the front. Keep in mind that's not necessarily always the best thing because you might be breaking trail. And when you're breaking trail, that's when you can suck down a lot of fuel when you're in the front. So
You might be welcome to go.
Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
exactly. A lot of times
that when I've been there.
yeah, I know.
Got that.
Fuel. Oh yes. Something else is again. We talked about this with clothing, machine setup, and everything. Don't reinvent your wheel the night before the race. Don't change stuff. Don't change stuff the night before the race. Just if it's been working for you, just stick with it. Kind of moving on to one of our last segments here, race strategy. We kind of talked about it. Have a kind of a plan. Kind of think about why you want to stop someplace, what you want to do. You have a plan A, B, C, D, E, F because things are going to change. Things will change in this race. But kind of have a plan. Say, this is our goal is to go to McGrath the first day and Caltag the second, or pick a couple spots where you think is very realistic, and kind of have that plan. But know that it can change. Again, if things are feeling good, just keep going. People are in front of you and they're going. There's no reason to not keep going. Because the more you put on that day, the less you'll have to put on the next day. So when you get to a couple things to think about, like something that I didn't think about, Galena probably has on the Yukon some of the nicer places to stay. But in my opinion, Galena is also kind of I hate stopping in the middle of the Yukon because it's cold, right? So when you get, let's just say it's 25 or 30 below on the Yukon, you come out of, when you're leaving, when you come out of Poor Man and you're coming down to Ruby, when you start dropping down, you'll feel it. You're on a road, and now you're not working real hard because as you get close to, you're on the road. As you start dropping, it gets cold. So something to be thinking about is when you get to Ruby, if you need to layer up potentially, maybe you might have to do something, but be thinking about that. But one of the reasons why I personally don't like staying in Galena, and I'm not saying don't do it, but instead, once you're on the Yukon, I like to just get that thing over with and get to Caltag. And I would rather stop in Caltag because now it's going to be warm going from Caltag. You know, the coast is typically warmer than the interior. Also, when you leave Caltag, it's on the way northbound, it's not too bad, but it's single track and it's bumpy. So you're not going to get cold. When you leave Caltag, you might be cold for the first 5 minutes, but I guarantee you after about 5 minutes, you will not be cold no matter what you're wearing. So, again, you're dressed up. If you like, we used to like to stop in Caltag because then we can kind of dress down a little bit from what we were running on the Yukon. So be thinking about that as your strategies when you're like where you lay over, because that can play into it a lot. So, but sometimes you're forced to lay over someplace you don't want to. I mean, we've gone to Galena plenty of times and laid over there just because temperature-wise, we couldn't make it to Caltag. We had to put on another layer. So. You know, we talked about, I think the biggest thing is just being efficient in this race. You know, don't get caught up into individual racing in this. This is a long race, it's 2,500 miles. You hear this every single year that these teams all of a sudden start battling each other and they're getting in front of the other. Now you're bumping, you're grinding, you're rubbing, and a team crashes out, has a problem, takes out a front end. That's not going to get you to the finish line. That's not going to. I think as a rookie, I think that your number one goal should be to finish this race. Don't worry about your position the first year. If you don't see the whole course, you're never going to learn. You're never going to become a veteran. Learning the course is going to be more important than a good finish. And I think that your goal should be to, you know, buckle down and just get this thing over with, and don't get hung up with the races. The race is, you know, this is a race where, you know, the tortoise and the hare. I mean, yes, there's a fast pace going on, but you need to finish this race. You need to finish it even to win. So a lot can go wrong in 2,500 miles. A lot can go on with your body physically. A lot can happen mentally, and a lot can happen on your machine. That's a lot of problems that can happen between, you know, in 2,500 miles. So be thinking about, you're way better off to slow down just a little bit and not have a problem. It is crazy what it takes. If you take 5 minutes to fix something on your machine, what that is time-wise of speed. It's when you start doing the math, it's crazy. Like if you just slowed down just a little teeny bit and not made a mistake, is way faster than hauling ass, making a mistake, and that costs you 20 minutes. That 20 minutes, it's impossible to make up. And you'll start realizing this. Even the fastest guys that are kind of running the same pace, and they might be a little bit slower, to think that you're going to make up time, I can tell you right now, the worst thing that you can do in this race is think that you're going to make up time. I guarantee you it's the worst thing. What that's going to do is snowball into a bigger problem 100% of the time. You need to be racing your race. You're not racing somebody else's race. You're racing your race. You need to be going the pace that you feel comfortable going. And that's it. Not what everybody else is going. Now, don't get me wrong. I think that there's times when you can tuck in behind a team potentially and maybe pick up the pace because they can see better than you can. Yeah, go for it. But when someone's comes up to pass you, let them pass. Don't be battling them. I guarantee you that's the worst thing that you do. If you're a faster team in the long run, you're going to get by them again. But just let them go by. Just let them go by. And like I said, sometimes it works in your advantage because they can be taking the hits sometimes. Obviously, also you want to be kind of respectful to the other racers. Don't be getting in front of teams and slowing them down. You know, it's not fair to anybody. Everybody paid to be here. It's a lot of effort. So don't be ruining other people's races is where I'm going with this. But don't get hung up in that battle and to think that you're going to make up time and go faster. When we go out and train, when we race, we essentially go the same pace that we're training. We don't all of a sudden, it's like, all right, it's the race, we're gonna all of a sudden, we're gonna wick it up, we're gonna set the world on fire now that we're in a race. We don't do that. We essentially are racing the same pace that we've trained the whole year. We just treat it like another day. There has been years that a team has scratched, a lot of years. Luckily, it's been a few years since this has happened, but almost every year there would be a team that scratched on Big Lake. You put a lot of effort, you got a lot of money, time, and effort into this race to go out there thinking you're going to set the world on fire and hit a driveway crossing and your race is over right there and then. You know, break a bone, get hurt. Don't do that. You know, just treat it like it's another day of you going riding. If you go riding every weekend, just do the same thing. When that flag drops, do the same thing you just did the last time you went out of Big Lake. Don't do anything different. Don't haul ass. Don't all of a sudden. Yeah, there's going to be certain spots where you might go a little faster than when you were training. I mean, sometimes when you're training, if you're out in the middle of nowhere, you want to be real careful. But you want to be careful in the race too, because if you make a mistake, it's going to cost you. And you spend more time fixing sleds and fixing your body. You know, you're better off just to slow down and just make things right. I like to make my sled 100% right. I don't like to rig it up because those little issues just snowball. Larry kind of brought it up with your teammate. I mean, at the end of the day, you will have problems in this race. It's going to happen. It's not a question if, it's a question when it's going to happen. You and your teammate staying positive, not arguing with your teammate, that just brings them, I mean, we're all human, right? We're going to make mistakes. Someone's going to hit a tree. Sometimes things come up that you can't see. Things happen. You going over there and just yelling at him, you idiot, what are you doing? You just cost us the race. That's zero productivity. That's not going to help you at all. Let's talk about, hey, what's this going to take to get this fixed and get back on the trail? Because guess what? That is going to happen. So again, it's just being efficient. Sitting there arguing about it, that's not going to help at all. So make sure you pick a partner that you're compatible with, and there's no reason to get upset with your teammate, because that's not gonna fix anything. It's not gonna help anything.
It can get heated. I mean,
yeah,
it's just, there's no doubt about it. It's competitive.
Very competitive. I've had some teammates that get very heated. We get into checkpoints, and my last teammate he raised his voice quite a bit, and we didn't talk. We didn't say we were yelling at each other. We were communicating with each other. So, but also I wear earplugs all the time, so you do have to kind of yell a little bit. But that's just how that goes. I think for the most part, I mean, anybody have any questions at all? You got anything you want to add?
So you guys have questions for us?
This is my favorite part. Anybody have any questions? Okay, you guys are all professionals then. You guys got this. No problem. There's got to be an A question.
So,
Something.
I got you.
Yep.
I know that Frankie and I are not gonna be we're not setting the world on fire at all. So we are gonna get past.
Yeah.
What's the best protocol? Like, if I don't notice you behind me.
Pull with it right.
Just pause.
Yeah, get it right.
And sometimes, unless there's it's tough because on the first day, let's say the slower teams kind of go out front. The first day is probably the worst day because everybody's kind of bunched up.
Yeah.
And but you want to basically just do your best to get out of the way. And like I said, don't be holding anybody up. It's not, that doesn't hurt you. I can tell you, in 2006, we were racing. Like I said, we weren't going to set the world on fire. We just wanted to have a good pace and have a good finish. That was our goal. And I remember there was a team that was setting the world on fire, and they would come up to us and they would get right on our bumpers and stuff, and we would pull over and we'd let them go by, and 4 or 5 turns down the thing, they were blown off the trail, and we would go by them again and just cruising. And that happened all the way until we saw them with no front end on their sled. So I mean, again, them setting the world on fire didn't do them any good. We just let them go by every time, and we caught up to them every single time because they were making mistakes. So, but yeah, be courteous of the teams. Pay attention, especially that first day. You want to make sure.
Here, like first day, it's gonna settle out. But if you do hear teams, I mean, it's it's not like, oh, I gotta get out of the way and put yourself, like
At risk.
don't run your, like, sled into a tree. I'll be honest, I actually had a scenario, probably like 5-6 years ago. I was coming through the Buffalo tunnels, and I got right behind a guy, and it startled him. And he looked back, and as soon as he looked back, he went into the trees and just carpet, and just the race was over. Because he got free. Well, he like looked back a couple times. Like he looked back, he knew I was there, and then he looked back again, and then did kind of like Chris said, where he pulled off. And
You shouldn't have bumped it.
I
bumped one.
Raysdale.
I have bumped the person in the race that didn't get over. I finally was sick of
Yeah.
them behind me, and so, again, you want to be courteous to everybody, I'll give everybody plenty of time. I don't expect you to hurry up and get over, but like, when you're in the Buffalo Tunnel, you're not pulling over.
Yeah,
It's this wide, and you're not pulling over, so you need to get to the next spot that's safe. Like I said, you don't need to get hung up either, because you're not gonna make either of our trip fast if you wad up, so just get to the next safe place and pull over. But I have in the past, I have gotten really upset, and if anybody knows me, I don't get upset too often. I've got a pretty mellow personality, but I about lost on this guy, and he told me I owed him a tail light. I said, good luck.
We have 3 questions, Tim, online?
Not this one.
Oh, nothing? Oh, okay.
No question?
Oh, yeah,
No.
no, there's 13 people.
Oh, 13 people, but no questions.
No questions.
Anybody have any questions at all? Anything else? Anything we talked about?
Seal and McGrath.
Yes. Sir, you guys got this. You guys are gonna.
Well, I think a round of applause is deserved for these guys.
Enjoy it. Like, it is awesome. The camaraderie, just hanging out there with everybody. Take it all in. It's
We want to thank Woody's for the sponsorship, obviously the MTA for sharing the building or letting us be in the building for sure. Larry for giving his 2 cents in this, it's very valuable. At Iron Dog, we have a huge raffle going on. Make sure you're pushing that to people, buy tickets online if possible. And then, not normal, but we do have a ton of Iron Dog swag in already for Christmas, so you can get it online, or you can stop in the office and the girls can help you. But we got a ton in, and we got everything. I don't think we have anything left, so thank you, everybody.
It's actually a nice one. Older one. Nice. Older ones have it, but actual couch and actual bar. I don't know why they put it
Yeah, you probably get it on one of the tracks.
So for your 7S this place,
Yeah?